The short-faced bear is one of the largest bears we've ever discovered, believed to have been up to 6 feet well on all fours, 11 feet while standing on 2 legs, and with the ability to reach up to 15 feet fully extended. I'm glad they no longer exist. On average, they're believed to have weighed between 1,600 and 1,900 pounds, with some reaching a ton, or 2,000 pounds total. Now that I'm sure we're all glad these things no longer exist, let's have some fun. Today on Life's Biggest Questions, we're going back to our roots of exploring life if we had to coexist with some of history's most terrifying animals. Today we're asking, what if the short-faced bear didn't go extinct? Welcome back to LBQ, guys. I'm your host for this one, Jared Bronstein, and today's video is a doozy. I think it's quite clear that if the short-faced bear didn't go extinct, well then, they would likely be the dominant race, and we'd all bow down to the king bear. Thankfully they did, so instead, we get to live the lives we're currently living, and instead get to make fun hypothetical videos like this one. As always, stick around for some bonus content to wrap this video up, but for now, let's jump right into it. Research has led professionals to believe that these bears roamed the earth as recently as 11,000 years ago. However, there seems to be different kinds when speaking about the short-faced bear. Some sources claim there is the North and South American short-faced bear, whereas others have referenced the giant short-faced bear and the lesser short-faced bear. The interesting thing about science, specifically historical animals, is that our knowledge about them is constantly evolving. As the days, weeks, and months go by, we tend to learn more and more. Of course, at times, this can make it tough to hit the nail on the head when creating videos similar to this one. But using what I got, I think we can come to a pretty fair conclusion that these things were pretty scary, and although there are different types of short-faced bears, whether it be geological or the length of their faces, all of these bears are relatively similar enough that you could likely say the same thing would happen if any of them currently walked the earth. In fact, some people believe they still do exist, but we'll cover that later. To start, let's talk about where these things would live. It seems North America was the most ideal place for these guys, particularly in the South. What we know as California and Texas was possibly once infested with these beasts, although their fossils have also been found as north as Alaska and the Yukon. Speaking of Canada, to no surprise, these bears are also believed to have roamed from the west coast of Vancouver, likely to the east coast. However, there is also a widespread belief that they could have also found their way to Russia. In fact, some believe in the most northern parts of Canada and Russia, home to some of the coldest winters, these historical bears are still wreaking havoc. Although I certainly hope that isn't the case, we don't have much to worry about because even if they do somehow still exist, which I doubt, they would never come down to interact with humans. Not that they couldn't absolutely tear us limb from limb, but odds are they wouldn't be all that aggressive if they didn't have to. Being so large, you'd think these bears would be an apex predator. And although they likely were one of the apex predators of their times, when it comes to diet, or at least killing method, there seems to be some debate among the scientific community. Some believe the short-faced bear actually didn't have a short face at all, nor did it have long limbs. These people also believe the bear was possibly omnivorous, much like most bears today. However, fossils found in Yukon and Alaska indicated that the short-faced bear had teeth long and powerful enough to not only clean the meat off of a bone, but crack it in half as well. So they're massive with long limbs, although that's been argued, and are likely meat eaters. Could they be any more dangerous? Of course they could. Some believe these things were the fastest running bears alive. And although bears aren't necessarily that fast due to their size, it's believed the short-faced bear was able to run up to 40 miles an hour despite being 1,500 pounds. Now, to no surprise, again, this has been argued, with some claiming that the bear's long, thin limbs would help with long-distance paced running instead of an explosive attack similar to that of a lion. Due to this theory, some believe that the bear didn't kill their own prey, but instead used their heightened sense of smell to find carcasses. The bears seem to have large nasal openings, leaving many to believe they would use their sense of smell to find already dead animals to feed on, even if the original predator was still feeding on the prey. A good example of this would be a mountain lion feeding on something it had just killed, only to have the short-faced bear show up. A fight likely wouldn't even break out, as the short-faced bear would easily be able to take the cat down, leading to the cat running off to find itself another meal. The bear now just gets to feast on a freshly killed animal without having to do any of the dirty work. Now, going back to the different kinds of short-faced bears, specifically the North and South American kind, it seems they both progressed and regressed in regards to their evolution. In the South, they started off large and over the years decreased in size. In North America, the opposite happened, with the bear species growing larger as a whole over the years. This is likely due to food supply, and considering how much of northern Canada is more or less untouched, I have no doubts these bears would thrive up there. The same could be said for Russia, at least the parts that are too cold for almost any human to endure. Of course, there are those brave enough to withstand the cold lifestyle of Alaska, and some parts of Russia, but if these bears decided to make a comeback, well, they may have to move altogether. Unlike a lot of previous extinct animals, the short-faced bear coexisting with us likely wouldn't drastically change the life of the average person. Although they are quite large and scary, it's safe to say they wouldn't want to roam into the city and start going through trash cans. Although it's possible and has happened in the past with other types of bears, as we could see, Like anything with nature, it's those that can adapt that survive. That's why the South American bear got smaller in size, whereas the North Americans got larger. A lack or influx of food supply will do just that. And naturally, over time, the bears physically had their bodies reshape due to the amount of food they had available to them. Meaning, in today's world, if these guys existed, they'd likely live in areas so far removed from society, we wouldn't even know it. Again, there are some people who do live closer to the woods and nature. For them, this bear could certainly be problematic. Not necessarily because they would be hunted, but simply because adding another species, especially one that is now going to be the apex predator, would completely throw off the entire ecosystem and food chain. As we know, when something like the food chain of an ecosystem is affected, there is a ripple effect that goes down the line. This tends to lead to a spike in the population of one species and a decline of many others. Depending on how much food the bears would eat, as well as what they would eat, would ultimately decide how much their existence would affect our everyday lives. It's possible we see a huge decline in any and all resources that come from northern Canada and Russia, simply out of fear that people don't want to be attacked while working up there. However, it's also interesting to think about how the bears would adapt. With less oxygen as a whole, and the difference in temperatures, odds are these bears wouldn't be able to behave the same way they did 11,000 plus years ago. In fact, their size, demeanor, aggressiveness, diet, all of it would change over the years. As we saw with their bodies physically, these bears clearly knew how to adapt to the given circumstances, which is why they went extinct as recently as 11,000 years ago. Sure, it's a long time ago, but when speaking about fossils and animals, 11,000 years ago really isn't all that long ago. So to say that them being alive nowadays would drastically change our lives as we know it, well, I don't think so. That being said, those living in more remote areas of northern Russia and even Canada may find themselves having to fend off bears that are as tall as they are while walking on all fours. That alone is a scary thought. And although these things would certainly have an impact on the food chain regardless of where it lived, an important factor to keep in mind is that if these things didn't go extinct, that would simply mean they found a way to adapt. As previously mentioned, the northern bears seem to grow in size over the years, while their southern neighbors actually got smaller. Clearly they found a way to adapt while they were still living, and although it's evident that them going extinct shows they weren't able to adapt all that well, if somehow, some way, they managed to never go extinct, well then the opposite would be true. But given what we know, that they changed in size, likely due to a surplus or lack of food, as well as land, respectively, leads me to believe that if they never went extinct, they certainly wouldn't look the way they did 11,000 years ago. Considering how much the Earth as a whole has changed in the past 11,000 years, I'm not even talking about climate change, but even factors like having vehicles such as planes and cars, societies building up cities, states, and countries, the world in general being a completely different place than it was 11,000 years ago would also have an impact on the short-faced bears. I can't say for sure what that impact would be, as I'm not a fortune teller, but based on past evidence, it's more than likely that these bears would not only decrease in size, but may also change their eating habits. Unfortunately, we're still learning about the short-faced bear. So, for example, depending on whether or not they were aggressive and attacked, or simply just used their size to scare off predators who found prey, would possibly determine their eating habits now. Here's what I mean. If they were aggressive and attacked, then it's likely they would be an apex predator, or at least high up on the chain. However, if they used their size to intimidate and they were not all that aggressive, then it's likely, if over the years, their diet were to be changed to a more herbivore diet, and assuming they also decrease in size, they wouldn't be able to feast on other animals the way their ancestors did. Clearly there are a lot of factors here. Assuming the bears never went extinct, ultimately would just go to show that they can survive all types of disasters, from extreme temperatures to wars, plagues. I mean, a lot's happened the past 11,000 years, and although some species have found a way to live through it all, it just goes to show those who survive the longest aren't the smartest nor the strongest, but those that can adapt the best. And that does it for this one, guys. Please let me know your thoughts on this video in the comments down below. As always, I love hearing from you guys. For now, we're going to be replying to some comments from the video. What if war broke out in America? Harrison Mitchell said, at this point, I would not be surprised if war broke out this year. 2020 has been one of the most surprising years. Yeah, man. I don't know. A lot of crazy stuff has happened this year. You could use the argument that we've been more focused on the negative, people in general, the media, but I also feel like a lot's happened. You know, a lot of influential people passed early on, you know, the current protests, the pandemic, a lot of crazy stuff has happened. And, you know, we're only 6 months in, so I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, it's been one of the most surprising years for sure in history, at least in my life of 26 years of being on Earth. AG 940,000 said, please voice your opinions without hatred in your hearts. Hatred is what led to this whole mess. Show love, show respect, be human. It's a weird thing. I feel like a lot of people are overwhelmed with emotion, whether that's anger, fear, being upset. We're in a weird place right now, man. The pandemic hasn't helped. You know, the recent events in the States haven't helped, but maybe it was a long time coming. I don't want to go too much into this, but, you know. I'm Not Creative with Name said, this gonna end up as the second Civil War? I really don't think so. Unfortunately, I don't know how this whole situation's gonna end. But as I said before in that video, guys, like, at the end of the day, the government's always gonna have more money and more power than the people. It's a sad reality. But until we do something to change that, which I don't know, really what there is that we could do, that's just how things are going to be. They're going to have more powerful guns, better armor, better gear. They're always going to have a way to oppress the people, at least in a physical manner. So that's all I'm going to say. Anyways, guys, that's it for this one. I've been your host, Jared Bronstein. You guys have been watching LBQ. We'll see you in the next one.